What's up, guys? Andrew Cooper here, aka Coop Fiasco on Twitter. This is Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco. I'm from Fantasy Alarm, sponsored by Better Sports Network, and we're here talking FFPC, talking ball today. We're wrapping up the second series. First series we did last month, overview all the positions, nice and easy, just looking at everything. Now, this series, we're doing actual strategies, actual draft strategies for each position. And I'm like you guys when it comes to this stuff. Honestly, I'm still a consumer of fantasy content all the time. I mean, I was a Redditor for 10 years. I'm still on Reddit all the time. I'm doing the AMA on Monday. I joined Twitter. Someone basically made me join Twitter 3 or 4 years ago once I got in the industry, but Reddit's where I've been at. And I search out certain types of people for the content that I want. So if I'm going to look at zero RB, I'm going to look at somebody like Kevin Tompkins. And that's why we brought him on. And the guest for today is someone very specific for late round quarterbacks. I'm like, okay, what are we doing for quarterback? Let's look and see what the Konami Code guy thinks, right? So we're going to bring on Rich Hribar next segment. We're doing it the same way we did it with the other 4 topics. I'm going to go through the elite guys. We're going to bring on a guest to break down the actual strategy itself. This time, we did zero RB. We did robust RB. Last week, I did yin and yang tight end. This week, we're waiting on QB. So we're going to figure out how to sort that strategy out, the best way to do it this year. But, again, just like you, I'll search out the best people for it. And I'll tell you what, I still like Reddit better than Twitter personally. Twitter is great. The analogy I have for it is picture yourself being a band, right? On Twitter, everyone's following you because they already kind of like you, or at least they want to know what you're saying. That's like if you're a band like Primus and you're playing a concert and it's all your fans. You're going to get more positive feedback. On Reddit, that's like going to Bonnaroo and you're playing to a bunch of people that are there not to see you. They might not be there for the music. They're just there to hang out. So your stuff better be good, and they're going to tell you if it's not. So that's why, Twitter's fun for the positive feedback and the memes and everything. But if you want to really get better at this game and get better at writing, get better at all those things, go over to Reddit and drop your stuff over there and see what they have to say, because those guys will let you know exactly what's up. And you guys, let me know exactly what's up with this show. If you like it, if you don't, who you want to see as guests, I'm always open to it. And I love when you guys trickle in the chat and hang out. Scampers, what's up, brother? What's going on, guys? So let's get to the topic at hand. Quarterback this week. We're going to be looking at the elite guys now. We'll bring in Rich Hribar, and then I'll wrap it up with the dynasty guys after. This year, everyone that's done a draft so far or a mock draft, what you'll notice is that quarterbacks are going higher than ever. And it's been trending up the last couple of years, but this year it's really hit a peak. I mean, we see 3 quarterbacks going by the end of round 2. You have 4 or 5 by the end of round 3. And by the end of rounds 4 to 5, sometimes 7, 8 guys off the board. That is wild to me, considering the history of this game. I mean, even just last year, I looked at it, 2022, 1 QB off the board by round 2 was Josh Allen. By the end of round 2, only one other guy went, Justin Herbert. And by the end of round 4, you basically saw Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow go. That was it. Like first 4 or 5 rounds, maybe 4 QBs. This year, 7 or 8. I personally believe that best ball and the proliferation of that is to blame, with people drafting Kelsey in the first round, having to stack with Mahomes, drafting Stephon Diggs and A.J. Brown, having to stack Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Of course, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins go so early that someone's going to reach on Joe Burrow, and it just pushes the whole thing, right? Someone takes Mark Andrews, they turn around and take Lamar Jackson, and it's carried over now into this format here. And there's honestly, in my opinion, room to make some money by waiting on quarterback. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I will say this, though. I wanted to point out that the shift from quarterback, part of it could be due to best ball, but another part of it is that right now, quarterbacks are scoring more points than they ever have in the past. I decided to go and see if there was anything behind the trend numbers-wise, and there is something there, right? I took players that have played at least half a season and looked at the all-time seasons in terms of points per game, right? At quarterback, 10 of the top 20 seasons in points per game have come in the last 3 years, just the last 3 years. Guys like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, and obviously Patrick Mahomes lighting the world on fire. 10 of the all-time 20 seasons in points per game. So it doesn't matter if there was 14 games or 16 games or 17 games or whatever, have come in the last 3 years. Compare that to wide receiver, 2. Only 2. Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams cracked the list. The rest of them, it's older guys, the Jerry Rices of the world, and even going back to guys like Randy Moss and Terrell Owens. Like it's not quite the same right now. At running back, one. The big names, obviously when you go back through all time, you're going to run into like Eric Dickerson and stuff like that. But the whole era with Priest Holmes and Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson and Marshall Faulk, those days aren't coming back. It's split backfields now. So the only season from the last 3 years that cracks the top 20 in points per game is Alvin Kamara in 2020. So there is a little bit behind the trend. At tight end, obviously, it's easy. It's four of the top 20, and they were 2 Travis Kelce, 1 Mark Andrews, 1 Darren Waller. We already kind of knew that, But that's what's pushing the trend. And so part of it is best ball, part of it is that narrative, but there is something behind it. But me personally, deep in my heart, I still feel the same way that I did back in early 2000s, same way I did back in 2010, same thing I did back in 2015, right? In 2016, quarterbacks, you could get them whenever. 2018, 1 quarterback went off the board in the first 3 rounds. 1 quarterback compared to this year where there's 5. And, the QB4 back then was going off the board in the 6th round. So QBs, they're relying all over the ground there. I still feel the same way where I look at my team at the end of the draft, and if I take a quarterback early, I just don't feel that good about it. Especially even when I stack Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, I look at my team and I say, where are my studs? Where are my running backs? Where are my wide receivers? And my heart and my head, they still feel that way today. And if you feel that way, then this is the show for you. Because we're going to go through the elite guys now and say where and when you just say, okay, enough is enough and draft them. But if you do fade them all, we'll tell you how to piece it together with the later round guys coming up, second segment with Rich Hribar. So first things first, let's look at the ADPs for these elite guys. For that, as always on this show, we're using FFPC ADP. I use that because these guys have serious skin in the game. These leagues, I know you can play leagues from $5 all the way up to 5,000 over there, but you don't usually go over to FFPC to play $5 leagues. Of course you can, but the real ones, the $2,000 main event, those leagues are dead serious, and it's only high stakes, serious gamers playing. And I like to see what they're doing because they're the ones that make the moves first. They were way ahead on Darren Waller and had him up at tight end 4, now sometimes going at 3, way before the rest of the industry. And now you see in your drafts, when you do real drafts, when you look at like the Queen's Classic and the King's Classic from FSGA, that's where those guys are going. So these guys are ahead of the game. That's why we look at theirs. So what we have for the elite guys, Earn Dog, if you could pull up that graphic, Ernie put a nice little graphic together for us to help visualize it. You've got Patrick Mahomes going in the 2nd round, Jalen Hurts, 2nd round, Josh Allen, 2nd round. Crazy town with those guys. Me personally, my policy on both quarterback and tight end has been the same for quite some time here, where I'm only taking a quarterback once all the players are gone that could be the number 1 flex player in the league. We talk about positional scarcity. We talk about all these other things. At the end of the day, the number 1 flex player is the guy that scores the most fantasy points as a position player. And I'll tell you what, it's never been a tight end. No matter how good Travis Kelce's been and how great positional scarcity is and all those things, it's actually never happened at tight end. So basically what I do is I make a big list of running backs and wide receivers that I think could be the best player in the league. As simple as that. And then when those guys are gone and they're spent, then I start taking a quarterback. And for me, that's not until the very end of the 2nd round, often the early 3rd round. So I really don't end up with much Patrick Mahomes, and I'm okay with that. And Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, my policy on them is I will take them, but it's at like the 2-3 swing. If they get there, then I can't let them go. But they very rarely make it that far. Anybody that joined us for the Fantasy Alarm Best Ball Draft that we did 2 days ago, Josh Allen did make it to the swing there, and I would have taken him in the next round if he had fallen, but they usually don't make it past that. So for those first 3 guys, that's my policy. I'm taking them in the 3rd round if they're there, and that means I'm not getting them. So, and that's fine with me, honestly. Lamar Jackson is a guy, that's one of the few guys that I will take at ADP. I'll take Lamar Jackson at ADP just because we've seen the difference making upside for him. It's the same as what we see from Jalen Hurts. It's better than what you get for Justin Fields. This guy's been an MVP of the league where he led the league in passing touchdowns and also ran for like double-digit touchdowns. We're talking like Cam Newton MVP season style of play. That is just difference making, and them bringing in Todd Monken to run the air raid and change things up, it means all the difference to me, honestly. So I'm willing to take him at ADP. But again, if you are just committed to late round QB, only take him if he slides. That really is how you should treat these elite guys. If you want to go late QB with us, is only take them if they slide. A guy like Joe Burrow right now, I'm hands off just because of the calf injury. I will gladly let someone else take Joe Burrow, and I'll take Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, I already have money on him to lead the league in passing yards because last year he was 2nd in the league in passing yards. And with Joe Lombardi, when you sort, the guys that played at least 5 or 6 games, he had the 34th ADOT in the league, the average depth of target. For those keeping track at home, there are 32 teams. So this guy, even with a dink and dunk offense, had the 2nd most passing yards. And now they bring in Kellen Moore, who Mike McCarthy shooed away because he's scoring, quote unquote, too many points. Earn Dog, you can bring that graphic down if you want now. He's scoring too many points and he's not giving the defense time to rest. I mean, my goodness, doesn't that sound good for fantasy football? Doesn't that sound good for laying a little scratch on the to lead the league in passing yards, right? So yeah, give me Justin Herbert. Those are the 2 guys I'm really taking there. I'm not taking Joe Burrow. I'm not really taking Justin Fields. I will take, but somebody always gets froggy and takes him way earlier. The ADP of 42, QB7, that's not how it really goes down in the expert leagues I do and the mock drafts and in the hometown leagues where my buddies just go wild. Justin Fields, he never really slides, quote unquote. So I'm taking Lamar Jackson if he slides. I'm taking Justin Herbert if he slides. And then Trevor Lawrence, I put in this group because his ADP is 50 and he is separated from the next crew. But again, what are we really expecting from him in terms of difference making upside? Can he be a guy that goes full 2013 Peyton Manning and throws 55 touchdown passes? Possibly. Honestly, I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. But if he's only going to run for 200, 300 yards, then he kind of has to. There's a whole group of guys, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, that kind of have to do that to a certain degree to have that upside. I'd rather bet on Justin Herbert with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston and Austin Eckler, and Justin Herbert essentially being a top 5 QB all time in points per game when you sort quarterback points per game, quarterbacks that play at least 5 or 6 games. He's top 5 all time in fantasy points per game, right? So I have no problem taking Justin Herbert there. Trevor Lawrence is still just a little too hypothetical. So if you want to take advantage of those with me, go over to myffpc.com, use promo code ALARM, and they'll match $25 if you deposit 35 or more. So that's what I'm doing. If I'm playing this late round QB game, then I'm taking Lamar Jackson if he slides. I'm taking Justin Herbert if he slides, and that's about it because we can piece it together. And especially in a single QB league, there's a lot of guys out there that there's guys that have been the MVP of this league that are going QB 15 and 16. There's a guy going 15 that's been a back-to-back MVP of the league. So we can piece it together. And that's why when it comes to this stuff, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to talk about what I'm doing, and people want to hear that. But what they really want to hear is from the experts of the experts when it comes to certain positions. Me, everyone knows I'm a bit of a tight end guy. So when we did yin and yang tight end, I talked the whole time last week. I talked my face off. Today, if we're going to go with a QB guy, why wouldn't we go with the Konami Swami? Why wouldn't we bring in Rich Hribar himself, dude, and ask him what he thinks? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to hear real quick from our guys actually, why don't we just bring them on? Forget the ads, Hribar. There's no time. We only have an hour here, right?
Hey, yeah, what's going on? Yeah, I listen. Anytime we can bump some ads, I think the people appreciate it.
Nah, forget it. We'll do a when you take off, we'll throw a little FFPC in there. We'll hear from those guys. I do like to hear from those guys. They got some good takes, but I mean, time is money, right?
Yeah, listen, it's that type of season. Everyone's got drafts this weekend and next. It's kind of like the two kind of weekends that we're just looking forward to the most, and then it all begins. It's like the Jesse Spano gif, it's so excited and also so scared. I'm starting to prep like the week one worksheet, and it's like, oh, it's here, like
It's
analyzing week one games.
it's crazy, man. It is crazy that we do this all year round, but best ball, it's nice and all, but it's nothing like that hometown draft that you set for like Labor Day weekend, right? That's what it's really all about, man. So
Yeah, I mean, I love the best ball leagues, and I love that it keeps a pulse on like the ebb and flow of like player movement, throughout the offseason. But there's still nothing like your redraft leagues, especially with the camaraderies involved, right? Like the getting together with your friends. My home league's up to 17 years this year, and it's largely an excuse for us all to get together. Like the prize and stuff, like is fine, but like it's fun to just get together and hang out.
exactly. It's oh my god, the home team traditions and like the trash talk during the draft is I mean, it doesn't get better. We have a lot of traditions with ours. Obviously, everyone takes finishes their drink the first time a Patriot is drafted. We're all New England guys where I live. We also someone always picks a player that's already been picked. They get the annual Ruben Drones award. One time, my buddy got so hammered during the draft that he picked Ruben Drones like 4 times
Oh, it's
himself.
incredible.
It was the best. We're like, so every year we're like, dude, when are you taking Ruben Drones, bro? But yeah, the Ruben Drones award for the inevitable multiple
I mean,
draft pick.
he was the highest guy on his board every time it came up.
every time it came around, dude. So yeah, one beer later, he was the Ruben Jones, man. He didn't even get him. Somebody else took him like way before. So too funny, man.
That's the best part is he didn't even have the guy.
They never got him. Never got him once. But anyway, we didn't bring you in to talk Ruben Drones. We brought you in to talk QB strategy. Again, the Konami code, man. It's crazy when you can invent a word that becomes a real word, right? Like it's like Kleenex, dude. Nobody says tissues. Nobody says mobile quarterback. It's the Konami quarterback. So that's pretty cool, man. I know you've probably heard that enough, but pretty cool stuff. But I want to ask you. So I just went through the top 8 quarterbacks. We had Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. If you are going to take one of those guys, which one are you taking?
I mean, obviously, so I want to take the third of the top 3 guys. It could be in any order, right? Like they're all kind of they could be mixed up. I personally have Hurts 1, but so like if I was able to get Hurts at QB 3, like at a palatable price, like that would be the most ideal situation. Obviously, you're at the mercy of the room, right? Like how aggressive is your room on quarterbacks? Sometimes I always tell people like your league better than I do. Sometimes quarterbacks will go later, right? Like than you expect. So you kind of just have to play it by ear. Sometimes they're hyper aggressive. So each room is different, but you never want to be the first person to take a quarterback because you don't know when QB2 is coming off the board. Now, granted, those 3 guys are typically clustered up and in more or less drafts, they'll be in a tight pocket. But what if, you take Patrick Mahomes first and it's 18 picks later and Josh Allen goes?
Dude, isn't that the worst feeling?
It's just a terrible feeling. You don't know.
And
So, I mean,
I honestly will just start I'll start saying stuff. If I do that, I'll be like, oh man, if you don't have a QB now, you're screwed. Even though I have the only one. But you got to start. Try and get that QB run going.
So I mean, you look at the history. So the quarterback has changed, especially like in recently. So particularly the past 3 years. But even with some regression last year, I mean, last season's top 24 scoring quarterbacks still had their 3rd highest correlation rate to points per game. And even with some late round QB hits last year, when you reduce that to the top 12 quarterbacks, the QB1s, it remained just as strong. In the past 3 seasons, top 12 quarterbacks in their ADP carry a correlation to fantasy points per game of over 50%, which is absolutely bonkers that we're getting. And it's really easy to kind of see how we got there is because gamers have been able to identify the archetype of quarterbacks that are just really hard to combat in fantasy. When I wrote the original Konami Code,
pretty much your fault, by the way.
It is. But when I wrote that article 10 years ago, it's going to be 10 years old this September,
wow.
Which is dating me. But, it was about how the rushing performance for quarterbacks that were perceived bad quarterbacks was undervalued. The Tim Tebow's, you think of like when Taysom Hill got the start. Justin Fields last year was kind of a more traditional Konami quarterback. But as time has progressed and just more athletes are playing the position at quarterback, it was only a matter of time till we started to get good passers that were athletes too. And once that happened, like the floodgates open and people were to say like, oh, like, because you can always arbitrage some passing, right? because there still is a surplus more of pocket passers than there are athletic quarterbacks, which is great because we still don't know where the ceiling for like this goes. But gamers have been able to say like, oh, I've got Josh Allen, who not only is rushing for 700 yards and 5+ rushing touchdowns, he's also throwing 35 passing touchdowns and 4,000 yards. And that combination is just hard to beat. And it's made really hard for like that sub tier of guys. When you look at like Burrow, Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence, those guys do give you a little bit of rushing, but those guys have to be so prestige from a passing level that like to even compete with being the QB1 overall, which I believe is thin, but they have to throw like 40+ passing touchdowns. And that's just like hard to bet on, like even for guys that good, and then maybe being the most probable guys to do it. It's just hard to say like, I need 40 passing touchdowns on my quarterback this year. It's just really hard. So like even that subset tier of like Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields, who are kind of like sandwiched in between those guys, like those guys kind of belong in their own space, just because if you do get the passing from those guys, like those other guys still can't catch them. They may not be as safe as like the Burrows, the Lawrences, and the Herberts from a passing stance, but if you do get that combination, it's just hard to flag down that archetype, and gamers have identified it.
Right. It's like if you look at Josh Allen, he's basically the passing of Kirk Cousins or a Jared Goff plus the rushing of like Aaron Jones. You know what I mean? Like which means that guys like Cousins and Goff will almost never catch up unless they go crazy.
And the mistake people make is they try to say, well, all right, I'm going to do 6-point passing touchdowns, right? It's going to reduce the Konami, but it's like tight end premium. All you do is you make the really great players even that much better. Like if you give Josh Allen 6-point passing touchdowns, he just becomes even better. It's the same thing with Kelsey and tight end premium. Like you don't make like you neuter some of like the traditional Konami guys. Like you would make Anthony Richardson worse probably in a 6-point passing touchdown league, but you just make the elite guys even better.
Exactly. It's like my bathroom's flooding. Why don't we just we'll put more water in there and wash that water out, right? That's what you're doing with the 6-point passing touchdown. And I will say about your Konami Code article 10 years ago, I got like a list of kind of my personal article Hall of Fame, which Konami's in there. The Sean Siegel's fragility, the fragility, that was 10 years ago too. And now you look at the landscape and that's like the most popular strategy. Right. Those are the two most popular strategies. So 10 years, that means 2029 or so, people will actually start using yin and yang tight end, I bet.
There you go,
saying, what are you talking? Like, what is that? What are you talking about? Right. So my time will come, Rich. My time will come. But yeah, man, it's just cool that to have something like that tied to your name where you set the tone. So why don't we get into it, man? Why don't we get into it? The top 8 guys off the board. Let's say hypothetically, this is what I've been doing is I just throw people into the situation where you took value everywhere else. Here you are. So in your draft, if you got a back end QB1 group, Earn Dog, if you can pull up 9 through 12. So these guys, in your typical 12-man league, not everybody ever drafts. I mean, sometimes no one drafts 2, but these guys should go. So in this group, who are you most likely to take or most likely to fade? Or are you just pulling the same move you talked about earlier where you say, hey, you know what? I'll let the other 3 guys pick who I pick.
Yeah, so I wrote an article about ADP again. I kind of do relitigate it like every year, just kind of follow the ebb and flow. And I highlighted that back end pocket of QB1s is typically the most fragile group to buy. And I've also identified it from an archetypical stance of like looking at the guys that bust at the highest rate, and it is the guys that don't run. So when you look at it, like say like last year, for example, the guys that were the major disappointments in that area, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, like these guys that don't run, these are like the guys that have your high bust rates, but people start the roster fill, right? You get in that back third, you're like, all right, I missed out on the top 8. I don't have a quarterback. And they panic and they say like, all right, well, I'm just going to take the next guy. And you end up taking, say, Dak Prescott, right? Like he's kind of fits that mold. Like Dak's not running anymore. It hurts to say because I do like the Cowboys and I like their offensive environment, but like Dak's not running anymore. So like he kind of fits that mold. Like you look at Kirk Cousins, like he's in that area. Tua Tagovailoa is in that area too. and then we'll probably talk a little bit more about Tua in a second. But so like we want to focus still on the archetypes that matter, like these guys that have that upside. So Anthony Richardson is a big standout. He's like, I want to monitor. I think Deshaun Watson still fits in that. He does take a step of faith. And obviously, if anyone doesn't just want to outright have Deshaun Watson on their team, no issues with me, man. Cross him off your list. But he does fit that archetype of guys. We've seen it before that can run. And when he did come back last year, as bad as he was as a passer, he ran for 28 yards per game. So he does still have that kind of in his range of outcomes. But you kind of want to avoid the pocket passers out of that tier because you can arbitrage those guys. Like, what are you getting out of Kirk Cousins that you aren't getting out of Geno Smith, that you aren't getting out of Jared Goff? And then the other thing you start to factor in is when you're picking guys out of that bucket, is you got to start looking at like these early season schedules, right? Like this is where you start to incorporate some of your strength of schedule stuff because yeah, you're not going to do it for Jalen Hurts if he's got like a, hard schedule. He doesn't until the end of the year anyways, but like, you're not going to do fade Josh Allen because he faces a good team like early in the season, right? Like he does. But when you start to talk about some of these other quarterbacks, like you look at Tua's schedule, his opening month is pretty rough. And he was a guy that didn't have any good fantasy games against good defenses last year. You look at Aaron Rodgers, right? He's in that area. The first 6 games for the Jets are absolutely miserable to open the season. So like, are you going to be confident in starting Aaron Rodgers on a new team when he opens the season, against the Bills, against the Cowboys, all these teams in that area, the Patriots, the Broncos, the Eagles before his bye week in week 7. And then you look at Geno Smith. He's got a great opening 6 games. He does have the early week 5 bye, which shows a little bit of wrench of things.
Earn Dog, let's pull up the next group then. So sorry to cut you off there, but
yeah,
so you're not, so from that, I'm with you there. Like Kirk Cousins, he has no interest in running the ball, not even doing QB sneaks. And people forget that like a guy like Tom Brady, at least not mobile, but at least he was like the best QB sneak quarterback of all time. Like at least he would steal some of those touchdowns, whereas like Kirk Cousins has zero interest. So I'm with you. Maybe fade that group. So of this group, I kind of separated these 3 guys because I feel like from that other group, I'm not sure if it sounds like you agree that maybe you just fade that other group and go for these guys. How early are you willing to go for a guy like Anthony Richardson or Jones or Geno?
Yeah, so if Anthony Richardson is there and I'm comfortable with like kind of where I am structurally in terms of like I've got my wide receiver core built out, and I'm talking having depth too because you need more wide receivers for bust rates, injuries, playing some matchups, and like I'm just comfortable with my roster, right? Like I feel really good about my core skill playing group at wide receiver and running back. Then I think it's fine to take that on at there, but he's not a guy I want because like Anthony Richardson is a buzzy name. So like there might be someone in your home league that's just like, yo, I'm going to get Anthony Richardson. Like, I can see a lot of home leagues playing out like that.
There will be that guy. There will be that guy.
Yeah. He's that guy. Watson probably is the guy that lasts because you'll probably have a group of people that don't want him. Right. But like then you're kind of just waiting, and then I'm looking at like the Goffs and Genos, like because Goff is another one of these guys. You look at his opening 3 games, he opens with the Chiefs, which potential shootout. We don't even know if Chris Jones is going to play in that game 2 weeks from now. Then he plays the Seahawks in week 2, and remember Jared Goff was the QB1 against the Seahawks last year in a game where Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't even play. And then he's got the Falcons the week after. I expect the Falcons to be improved defensively, but like we're talking about them early in the season, are they gelled at that point? Stuff like that. So you're getting like some of that early season start. That's when you start incorporating the strength of schedule to some of these guys because you're able to arbitrage the passing from those guys. Daniel Jones is the trickiest guy for me, right? Because he has that rushing, but he's not the kind of like Konami rusher that's like consistent. Like Daniel Jones will have a game where he runs for 50 yards, and then he'll have a game where he runs for like 10, right? Like
he looks like when he runs, he doesn't run. He doesn't look anything like Lamar Jackson, the other guys. He looks like a businessman that's like trying to catch a cab in the rain. Like he's like, you know what I mean? Like he looks like he's running against his wishes, right?
And then you look at the Giants, and you look at Daniel Jones first. And last year, he had no good games against the good defenses. Literally, his over/under for passing touchdowns right now at books is 17.5. So we know like no one's really factoring any passing. He was 30th in passing points per game for quarterbacks last year. His best game against a good defense was the Eagles in a game where he did have the rushing. I think he ran for 28 yards and a touchdown that game. But all of his other good games, Bears, Lions, Colts, all bad defenses. Then you look at the Giants schedule, they have our 32nd ranked passing schedule. He opens against the Cowboys, a team he was bad against both games. He's at the 49ers in week 3, the Dolphins in week 5, the Bills in week 6, the Jets in week 8, the Cowboys again in week 10, the Patriots in week 12, all before his bye. And from a stance of Daniel Jones, like he does give you that rushing upside to say like he could rush for a touchdown or he could give us some jailbreak rushing points. But are you, from a confidence stance, ever going to be expecting ceiling weeks from Daniel Jones in those games? You're probably not, right? So he's probably
three touchdown week. This guy, look at the last couple of years. What, 10, 11? Last year he threw for 15 touchdowns, right? Like his rookie year with 24 was his best year in terms of touchdowns. He hasn't come close to that. So when they say 17 touchdowns in a 17 game season, I'd be shocked.
But you're just not going to be expecting ceiling weeks from him in like those weeks. So like that makes him already more of like a 2 QB guy for me than a 1 QB guy. So yeah, I mean, the guys, when I get like firewalled off at the position, like you laid out, I'm monitoring where Richardson and Watson go. Then I'm immediately kicking the can until, like, unless Dak falls, then I'm looking at Geno and Goff.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Watson that people forget is that, like, say what you like, obviously he's got the personal issues. And if you want to take him off your board for that, go ahead. I'm not going to, because I just care about fantasy points. And all time, if you take all the quarterbacks all time and sort by fantasy points per game, Deshaun Watson is number 3 behind, like, it's tough to argue against a guy that's been essentially top 5 every time he's played. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
And we got to really go back to like Dante Culpepper to be like the last guy that was as good as Deshaun Watson and just stopped being good. And he was even a little older than Watson is now, who's only going to be 28 this year. And he came off the knee injury. I mean, Watson's had 2 knee injuries, and then Randy Moss retired.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
or he retired, is left.
Right. Yeah, no Chris Carter, no Randy Moss. That'll hurt you. But I mean, this guy hasn't. I mean, Deshaun Watson. The other part is that, like with Russell Wilson, you can at least say, okay, well, maybe a lot of it was the coaching. Maybe it was Pete Carroll and the system. But with Deshaun Watson, it's just been a mess with the Texans. It's been all over the place. He hasn't had consistent weapons, hasn't had consistent coaching yet. I mean, he went 4-12 and threw like 30-something touchdown passes with only like 7 picks. I don't know how he was so good on such a bad team, but I mean, we've seen him through a ton of adversity already. So if it just comes together a little bit, he could be a value there. But I know you mentioned 2 QB leagues, so why don't we pivot to that? Dog, pull up that next group. We've talked a little bit about some of these guys, but if you're getting into super flex and 2 QB, super popular now, let's say you waited, you did get Deshaun Watson as your first QB. Now you need a second QB. Who do you feel most comfortable with from this crew? Or what's your strategy going in? Because I know, again, the sharp way to play it a lot of times is not to say, oh, well, I'm just going to make sure I get this guy. It's to say, hey, here are the guys that I'm comfortable taking if they slide, and just, take a couple guys off your board and just monitor it. It's different than other positions, really.
Yeah, so in 2 QB leagues, I love the kind of approach that I have with running backs. A lot of people have talked about, anchor running back or hero running back, right? Where you get kind of one of the elite guys, then you kind of build the platoon. I love that strategy in 2 quarterback leagues. Like I said, so the first 2 guys I'm monitoring are, Geno and Goff. And obviously if they, I can't land those guys, like if, say Goff's out of this group, then the next guys I'm looking at are definitely Kenny Pickett. The Steelers are due like a wealth of passing touchdown regression to the mean. Like, I mean, obviously Kenny Pickett had a 1.8% touchdown rate last year. There is no way that's going to happen. Obviously Deontay Johnson's going to catch a touchdown pass this year.
Walter Payton has more career touchdown passes than Kenny Pickett.
and I don't want to get like super into like the preseason like hype stuff. It's just like, just buying base rate, like them bouncing back to the base rate is going to be like a huge pro.
It'll happen. And the thing is, you look at, I look at like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill last year, and where they were going ADP, Tua kind of had to outperform value, or they would have been big time busts. Well, look at Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson and George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. Like, if Kenny Pickett if he doesn't take a big step forward, there's going to be a lot of disappointed fantasy gamers, which kind of puts me on the path of maybe I will get some exposure to Kenny Pickett,
Yeah, and then if you're just looking from like a schedule stance, Jordan Love has our number 1 passing schedule of the season, and like he's kind of a wild card because like I don't think people realize too, like he's got a little Konami in him. Like he's a decent athlete and he can run a little bit. Great schedule. You're worried about them just maybe tempo, playing slow. They definitely have the look of a top-down team that wants to run the football a lot. The Saints are the same way. Saints have a great schedule, but again, they're a team that were from weeks 8 on last year. The Saints were dead last in the NFL plays by a wide margin. They add Jamal Williams, they draft running back and start around. Like, this is a team that if they have a chance to grind the hell out of the football, really feel like they're going to. So it does scare me a little bit. And then Brock Purdy, I mean, why not just take a shot? Like, everything's kind of priced in, right? Like, I was kind of down on like people just like factoring in the 5-game splits of Brock Purdy and saying this is what he's this quarterback. I think there's a lot of questions. He's definitely not going to have a 9% touchdown rate like he did when he came in. But when you look at just the playmakers he has, like he just has to get the football to those 49ers guys. And the best thing about Purdy is you don't have to get the 49ers guys right. Like you don't have to take Deebo Samuel at wide receiver 20. You don't have to have Brandon Ayuk fight for these targets. You have to have George Kittle have like that spike. You just soak in like Purdy getting the ball to all these great players, and you take him. So I love to get two of like those guys. If I can get two of those guys, the one guy that really bums me out that I really want, and I know you had some funny tweets about him, because I was high on Sam Howell as a prospect, but dude, the Commanders' schedule is an abject nightmare. Like it is
brutal, right?
It is horrible.
It's the same thing with the Giants. They're playing the AFC East, and it's
man.
I don't know where Vegas is finding 6.5 wins for that team, because I go look at that schedule. I'm not finding more.
I mean, you get that great open. So if you have Howell in 2 QB leagues, like you fire them up week 1, they're playing the Cardinals. You feel great about it. But then look at this afterwards: Broncos, Bills, Eagles are the next 3. That's rough. Then he gets a nice little reprieve, but then you still have Eagles, Patriots. You have the Cowboys, the Dolphins. In the fantasy playoffs, he plays the Jets and the 49ers. Like
nightmare.
It's tough, man.
Robert Saleh and other Robert Saleh.
It's tough. I mean, the ADP is fine and stuff, but like, yeah, it's really tough.
And I think the funny thing is, like, you know, the thing with Twitter is like, you know, half the stuff I'll send it if it's funny. So the Sam Howell stuff, dude, you know what I mean? Like, you got to understand that there's a bit of memery going on, but I've come around a bit. He's obviously faster than he hasn't run a 40 in a long time. He's clearly faster on field than we say. And if
he plays well through this schedule, then like Washington's got something.
Right, for sure. And the other thing I worry about for Dynasty for a guy like Sam Howell is a new group just bought the team.
Yeah.
And what's the easiest way to put your stamp on a new organization than to...
You tell me Magic Johnson doesn't want Caleb Williams?
That's what I'm saying. 100%. Like, it could literally be like they looked at Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett, and Jacoby was just better in practice, and they were like, this Sam guy, that's our guy, right? Like, let's get those L's up on the board. I mean, I watched the Jets fire Adam Gase because he finally got the Jets winning games, right? Some of these teams want to tank. The Cardinals clearly want to come in last, right? So you never know with that, but I mean, kind of exciting. What Matt Stafford? Are you doing any Matt Stafford at all? Or are you just out on that?
2 QB league only, like part of platoon, no problem with it. I still have some faith in Sean McVay, right? Like, I don't think that we should just like the Rams are going to be better than they were last year. Like, it's impossible for them to be worse, really.
Right.
And Stafford's healthy, will, like I said, you still have the McVay factor. The offensive line's by product going to be healthier than it was last year. So 2 QB leagues only, but again, not one of these guys that's going to give you any rushing, but whatever.
All right, well, let's talk about the deep boys. And again, ADP goes out the window completely here, right? It does not matter at all. So why don't you go ahead and say something nice about my boy Mac Jones?
I mean, the thing about Mac Jones is that the offense was good 2 years ago when he had a real offensive coordinator, right? Like, people forget that the Patriots were top 8 in points per drive, scoring rate per drive, and Mac Jones' rookie season. Also, as much as a donkey as a head coach Josh McDaniels is, and he's not a great people person, like, dude, look what he did last year with Derek Carr too. Like, the Raiders were again top 6 points per drive. Like, the dude, there's a reason why Josh McDaniels keeps getting all these opportunities to fail as a head coach, and it's because the dude can coach offense. Like, it just is what it is.
Exactly. He should settle in eventually just to be a coordinator, because I mean it's a different job. It's a different job. But
and we've seen that with like Dan Quinn. Like, Dan Quinn's a guy, right? Like, you were a defensive coordinator, buddy, and you were made to be it, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like, you were excellent.
Right? Like, those type guys where that should be your one job. And the thing that sucks is some of those guys, they go on to be a head coach and then they never want to come back and do it, where they probably should have. Like, Rex Ryan probably should have just been a defensive coordinator and hung around a little bit. Some of these guys, at least. So. But all right, well, I'll let you pick your own guy instead of having to pick my guy here.
Well, I think there's a default that makes you even a guy like Garoppolo alive. But I mean, I'm looking at guys like Ritter and Stroud and kind of Bryce Young in that area, just because we don't know where the upside lies, right? Like, they could be outright failures too, but we know we're getting a little sprinkler rushing. The Falcon situation is just really good. The infrastructure of the offense is good. The schedule is good. Ritter was really bad last year in the sample he played, though, and I wasn't high on him coming out. It's just a guy to kind of, like you said, at this point of the draft, we're just tacking on to these 2 QB rosters and hoping we find something. It
speaks to how important the quarterback position is. When you look, the Falcons had one of the best off seasons I've seen in a long time. Like I feel like they brought the guys they wanted to bring back, like McGarry and the other linemen there. They brought Keith Smith back. They got Bijan Robinson. They have Kyle Pitts. They have obviously Drake London. They made improvements on defense. They didn't lose any of their guys, and they brought in a bunch of guys. And still, with a great offseason like that, we sit here and we say, well, all that matters is the quarterback, right? It's kind of crazy, man. It's kind of crazy that a team like that, if they landed Derek Carr instead of the Saints, we'd be looking at this team and we'd be fired up. But instead, we're like, who knows?
And I still have a lot on Falcons futures, man, too. Definitely their win
man.
total I'm already invested in, and potential division winner. So
what line did you get them at? What was
7.5? 7.5.
I mean, they could easily win that division. It's
yeah. I mean, so yeah. I mean, those are just kind of the guys that we're looking at that point. And we hate Arthur Smith for fantasy football. He clearly hates fantasy football, but we have a pretty large sample that Arthur Smith is a pretty good play caller and play designer. And it's a bummer that he hates fantasy football.
He's a good play designer for like Navy. Like I don't want. Like, why? You see the depth chart he released? It has the starting lineup has 12 guys on it, including a fullback Keith Smith and like 2 tight ends.
This guy,
the only 2 wide receivers is just. He's trolling us, man. It's on purpose, dude. Because Kyle Pitts. I was just talking about it last episode where he's like top 5 in yards per route run when he lines up at wide receiver, and even in the preseason games he had 7 snaps in line, 1 out wide. Like Arthur Smith is determined to turn Kyle Pitts into Jason Witten somehow.
Yeah, just keep the faith. I was arguing with someone of this on Twitter about a week ago about Kyle Pitts, and they were telling me he shouldn't be the tight end 1 in Dynasty, and I think that's bonkers because Travis Kelce didn't even catch a pass in the NFL until he was a couple weeks before his 25th birthday.
Right.
We've already got 1,000-yard season for a dude that was at 21 years old. Just keep the faith, have some patience, just relax. Even if you don't get the Kyle Pitts run out in 2023, this dude is immensely talented. Keep the faith.
So much time, dude. Zach Ertz has 1,000-yard season when he was 28. Delaney Walker didn't break out till he was like 31. So, I mean, it might take time, but I'm in with you, man. Now's the time to go get him for cheap. All right, before I get you out of here, Rich, I want to ask one more actual fantasy question, then I'll let you plug some stuff. There are a lot of very deep formats. It's not just us being sickos in fantasy football anymore. Around the industry, people are getting crazy. My buddies from home are like, let's do Superflex, let's do all this crazy stuff. Yeah. So, leagues where you just draft every single player. If you had to pick your favorite backup, and you can go either way you want with it, whether you want to say who's most likely to actually play or who would have the highest upside if they did get a chance to play. But if we're going backups here in like deep super flex, is there anybody that you're like, you know what, I'll throw, 30 round draft, I'll throw this guy on the bench or on the taxi or something?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious guy is Sam Darnold, right? Like, I mean, just because what if Purdy, this 5-game sample, was just a flash in the pan? We've seen some guys in this system before pop, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, right. Brian Hoyer, even for that little bit before. Like, so we've seen it before. And Darnold was actually pretty good last year, that final month of the season with the Panthers. So, and Darnold's only 26 years old. I think people forget that. Like, it's crazy to think about it. He's only 26 years old. So he's going to hang around. So, like, he's the guy that stands out the most. I wish I had any faith in Mariota if he had the quarterback, but Jesus, he's looked so even awful this preseason. He was so bad last year.
I know.
You'd love to say, like, if he got a chance to play with the Eagles infrastructure, you'd be excited, but like, Jesus, man. He's
every once in a while he just flashes, man. Still, like, he just makes a play or has a game, and I'm like, maybe. What if, Yeah,
I mean, either of the Titans guys are probably drawn live, if they get a chance to play, just because they are mobile. That's probably about it. Obviously, you still have Huntley down there. If Huntley gets a chance to play, and Huntley playing with what the Ravens have built now compared to what Huntley did the last 2 years, like when he's coming in with a bunch of vagabonds throwing into DeMarcus Robinson. Because like that just showed you how good Lamar Jackson was last year, right? Yeah. Like it's like this is what Lamar Jackson was working with, and they were still somehow good. And then it just gets exposed when you remove a talent like Lamar Jackson off the field. But now you have Monken, and they're gonna play actually 3 wide receiver sets. And
Ravens fans like, why can't Tyler Huntley throw it to Devin Duvernay? What happened? What's going on here?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bummer that the Ravens waited till they had to pay their quarterback $260 million to like structure the offense around him. But hey,
What makes up for it is that the Tyler Huntley, like the contracts that you can give these or force upon these restricted free agents, it's like an indentured servitude. Like Tyler Huntley, people are like, why doesn't he get traded to another team? He's literally free.
Yeah.
He can't leave. Like he couldn't. There's no escape. Why even have restricted free agency when it's the most obvious move in the world to keep that guy? It's just crazy.
No one's giving them a second round pick for.
Does he have to sit down and actually put pen to paper on that contract? Like they make him sign because he has no choice, right? But like, do they actually say like you have to sit down and sign and actually physically sign the contract? It's crazy.
I'll say the answer is just basically not Kyle Trask. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, man. Hey, well, thank you for joining us, dude. The Konami QB Swami breaking it down, and you actually have a show on this channel, Better Sports Network. Yeah, tell everybody about what you got going on, both with the show and everything else.
Yeah. I'll have a show on Better Sports Network at 12 o'clock Eastern every Thursday in season with my guy Ray Summerlin. So look for that in season. So definitely look forward to being able to talk about some actual games, right? Like I said, I'm starting to prep the week one worksheet, and like I care about, because this is where like I'm the best at. I'm better at like the in-season calibration stuff, recognizing trends, playing DFS. Like that's my strength, and I can't wait to analyze these games. But if you do like anything else that I had to say on this show, want to check out the draft kit that we put together at Sharp Football Analysis, head over there. Anyone listening to this can use the promo code SHARP50 and get 50% off that if you're drafting this weekend and next. Go hit that up.
Yeah, there you go, dude. That Sharp Angles podcast, man, just listen to you guys. Even listening to you guys talk about offensive line is captivating. I'm feeling it, man. So keep up the good work, dude, and we look forward to that in-season stuff.
Absolutely, guys. Good luck the rest of the draft season.
Yeah, cheers, man. All right, now we're going to let our buddies from FFPC say a little something real quick, and then I'm going to get into the deeper dynasty players, just like we've been doing with the other positions. We just sorted out pretty much the whole landscape. I mean, he just told you we got all the way down to Sam Darnold. All right, so now we're going to get into the deep dynasty stuff. Let's hear from FFPC. We'll be right back.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with two wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week one, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get two wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes you think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week one. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week one. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
Wow, let's go, baby. We are back. 1912, I see you in the chat. You said get into the Yang tight ends. We actually just did that episode on Monday. I broke down. Usually, what I've been doing is I have the guest come on in the second segment to break down the specific strategy. Like we just did late round QB. Kevin Tompkins came on to do zero RB. On Monday, I broke down tight end, and I just did the second segment myself. I did the first two myself and just broke down the entire tight end landscape. So go check that episode out. It's up on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. It's on YouTube. It's David Gautieri. We had the guest come on third segment to do the dynasty stuff. That's how we've been doing these ones. This is the last one. And then next week, we're just going to get straight into some sleepers and busts. And we're just going to straight up go through a draft and tell you the targets and the guys we don't want. It's crunch time now. We have to just go through and say, hey, this is what we're actually doing. So that's what we're doing. This week, we're just going to wrap up quarterback. We just went through the full top to bottom first two segments. Now I'm going to hit you with some sleepers in dynasty, or honestly, some guys that I'm just targeting, guys that I'm trading for. And as Rich pointed out last segment, one of the big things he said about looking for later quarterbacks and looking for backup quarterbacks or things like that. This is the one position where the smoke is most important because it is a truly linear depth chart. It's truly linear in the sense that at running back, Jaylen Warren can be hyped up all he wants, right? Even if Jaylen Warren were to hypothetically become the quote unquote RB1, Najee Harris isn't going anywhere. If Najee Harris is the RB2, it doesn't look any different than what it looked like with Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott together, right? So at that position where it's not linear, and same with wide receiver, like on some teams, who cares if Mike Evans is the wide receiver 1 and Chris Godwin's the wide receiver 2? It doesn't really matter. I mean, wide receiver doesn't even work like that because it's split end and flanker and slot. But even if it were, they're going to play anyway. At quarterback, that's not how it works. This isn't, Miami with Tim Tebow and Chris Leak, right? This isn't, I guess with Taysom Hill, maybe the one exception, but he really doesn't play. It's a linear depth chart, like punter. You don't have two punters. You have one punter, and then there's a backup punter. So at quarterback, when there is smoke, sometimes there's a catalyst where the guy gets the job. Dak Prescott takes over for Tony Romo, and Tony Romo goes away. I mean, and we've even seen it at the craziest, lowest levels. I mean, we could say Tom Brady's a fluke all we want, but he took over for a 10-year, $100 million man in Drew Bledsoe. Brock Purdy just beat out a third overall pick, Trey Lance, as the last pick in the draft. Brock Purdy just did that, and now Sam Darnold's ahead of Trey Lance as well. These catalysts can have monster impacts because there's one job. So when I look around, I look at situations like the Browns with all the moving parts there and all the sentiment there. Like Dorian Thompson-Robinson was so good this preseason that they decided to move their other quarterback. A guy, Joshua Dobbs, that came in and played for the Titans last year when they needed a guy, played coming off the street over Malik Willis. So we know Joshua Dobbs can kind of ball, and this other guy can ball. And if Deshaun Watson isn't the big dog, then maybe Dorian Thompson-Robinson takes over. Maybe they decide, you know what, this Deshaun Watson experiment never worked. It doesn't work. People don't like it. So we're going to move on and do that. That's one side of it. The other side, Joshua Dobbs now just goes to the Cardinals where it's wide open over there. This new regime has no allegiance to Colt McCoy, right? Clayton Tune, they drafted him. He couldn't beat out Colt McCoy, it seems, right? David Blau, who cares? So it's entirely possible. Dustin points out in the chat, great point. Russ beat out Matt Flynn, who signed a massive contract. The Seahawks traded for Drew Lock, and Geno Smith won. And then Geno Smith was awesome. So that's what we want to look for. We want to look for smoke wherever we can find it. For me, there are some guys that I'm targeting in Dynasty at every level right now, especially in super flex leagues, but even in single QB. So we're going to look at, as always, Dynasty FFPC ADP over there. Again, FFPC gold-plated leagues. According to Eric Bachman from FFPC, they've never had a Dynasty league fold. They've never had one fold. People will leave, they'll come, they'll go, but they bring people in to replace them. And you can play leagues over there from $100 up to $5,000. So it doesn't get more heavy hitter than that. If you're serious about this, this is the place where serious gamers play. And if you want to play, go over there, go to myffpc.com, use promo code ALARM, and they'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. That's for first time depositors. First time, go over there, get that in there. They'll give you a little dough, and you can either do a startup draft or you can go for the ultimate challenge, right? doing a startup draft, that's like climbing Everest, but everyone's kind of doing that these days. It seems cool, but it's not what the hardcore gamers are doing. The hardcore climbers are going over to Annapurna and they're climbing the mountain where like 1/3 of the people die trying to get to the top. That's picking up an orphan league. That's going picking up a team that somebody abandoned, and you say, "Come here, my little sweet orphan team. I'm going to raise you into the greatest, healthiest team of all time." And the most fun part about that is that you can trade away all those other players. You have no allegiance to those players. Like tearing apart an orphan team is probably the most fun you can have. So what I've been doing, I look at guys like Kyler Murray, QB 13, still only 26 years old. We talked about Sam Darnold, 26, just a moment ago, still only 26 years old. Here's how he's finished in points per game in his first 4 seasons. QB 12 as a rookie, QB 5, QB 4, QB 7. This is a player that is top 5 all time in fantasy points per game. And I don't care if he's with the Cardinals or if he's with somebody else. I mean, I guess it would be if he plays for the Oakland/Las Vegas Athletics, that would matter, right? Unless you have some sort of crossover baseball football league. But I don't care if the Cardinals want to move on. This guy's going to go somewhere else and do his little scamper around thing and score a bunch of fantasy points. So it doesn't matter to me. I'm buying Kyler Murray QB 13. If he's top 5 all time, all he has to do is get healthy and come back, and he has many more years to play. So Kyler Murray, I'm interested in. We talked about him earlier, so I won't go too deep. Mac Jones, QB 28. This guy finished QB 18 as a rookie and had the second highest completion percentage all time as a rookie behind only Dak Prescott, right? He was QB 23 last year, and he's going QB 28 now. And we expect Bill O'Brien to come in and be better. Bill O'Brien orchestrated 2 of the greatest offenses of all time in NFL history, 2011 Patriots, and he was part of the 2007 Patriots. Those are 2 of the greatest offenses all time. And they kind of rebuilt something very similar. I know it's Tom Brady, Mac Jones isn't Tom Brady, and Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki aren't Gronk and Hernandez, and Juju Smith-Schuster isn't Wes Welker, but those guys can play a similar role. And in your 2 QB Superflex leagues, Mac Jones can easily be a guy that you start every week. I mean, as a rookie, he was QB 18, which is squarely in lineups in Superflex and 2 QB. And the last one I'll talk about is a very deep player, and I know Dustin in the chat is a fan of this player. It's Hendon Hooker. I look at teams like, the Eagles and the Chiefs, where they had okay quarterbacks in Alex Smith and Carson Wentz, but Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes came up behind and started for these teams that were already ready to go. If they move on from Jared Goff, this team is already fully built. And what if Hendon Hooker's just awesome? They drafted him. What if he is? Who knows? Like, he's coming off an injury, so he's probably not going to play this year, but I'm stashing a lot of Hendon Hooker. I think you should do the same. He's QB 35. And if you want to do that, go over to myffpc.com. Use promo code ALARM. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more, and you can go and do a startup and get these guys easily at ADP, or pick up an orphan team and just start trading away other people's assets that they left behind. Just start going crazy. That it truly is the most fun. So go over there and set that up. Listen to the smoke out there. I know we only have a minute left. We're going to go right up to it here. Listen to the smoke. There's smoke on Sam Darnold and Tyler Huntley, as Rich Hribar pointed out last segment. Stetson Bennett looked pretty good. Matthew Stafford, who knows? He could retire, man. Like, he's banged up. Like, look at Big Ben, Tony Romo, Jay Cutler. Guys that play the way he do, they don't last long. And then another one, Aiden O'Connell. Kind of interesting. Jimmy G doesn't do it. Maybe he'll be the guy. Anyway, that's it for us. We got to go. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco. We're doing it all year, and we're getting you ready for your leagues. Hang tight after this. Britt Flynn is on Better Sports Network, hitting the news, hitting everything important with Britt's Blitz coming up next. Thank you guys for joining us. Good luck in your drafts this weekend.